Hey, welcome back to the stash. At this point, what can you even say about the amazing Spider-Man that hasn't already been said? This entire run has been an absolute disaster, filled with inconsistent art, baffling story choices, and a complete disregard for any sense of continuity. Every issue feels like it's being pulled in different directions, whether it's the shifting art styles, the wildly inconsistent characterizations, or the way it treats Spider-Man like a supporting character in his own book. And yet, somehow, this issue wasn't completely awful. It does unfortunately suffer from the problems that have plagued this entire arc, and even repeats some too, such as the artwork continuing to be jarring as it bounces between styles that don't quite mesh. The magic elements too feel half-baked, thrown in with no real structure or logic, and the overall story, it's just there, limping towards the finish line with no real momentum. But compared to the absolute train wreck the rest of this story arc has been, I'll admit, there were some moments in this issue that actually worked for me. That being said though, one decent issue doesn't erase the mess that came before it. This arc, The 8 Deaths of Spider-Man, has dragged on far longer than it should have, with little to justify its existence outside of a handful of okay moments sprinkled in between all the nonsense. And the worst part is, this is the main Spider-Man book, the flagship title, the one that should be leading the way, setting the standard for what a Spider-Man story should be, yet right now, all it does is remind us how far this character has fallen. So join us today as we go over the amazing Spider-Man issue 69, the penultimate issue of the 8 Deaths of Spider-Man story arc. But first, ad time. Comics aren't just stories, they're history. Every single issue is a piece of someone's past, a fragment of their journey. And let's be real, if you're a collector, you know the struggle. Hunting for that one key issue, avoiding sketchy listings, and praying that the near-mint comic you bought isn't actually a disaster when it arrives. But what if I told you there's a better way? And that's where Encore comes in. It's not just another marketplace, but rather a community-driven hub where collectors just like you or me showcase what they're selling. Instead of scrolling through stock photos or vague descriptions, you get actual videos from sellers showing you exactly what you're buying. It's like if an auction house went digital, but instead of boring listings, you get fast, interactive videos from real collectors. Shopping is super easy too, just swipe to bid on auctions or set a max bid, and the system will handle the rest. But if you prefer to buy instantly, the Buy Now section has great deals, and you can even send offers to negotiate with sellers. Now if you're like me, you don't just throw your money at any random seller online. Encore takes trust and safety seriously. Every seller is ID verified, and the Encore guarantee has your back. So if you receive something that isn't as described, you're protected. And since every listing is a video, you're seeing exactly what you're buying, straight from real collectors. So if you love comics, collecting, or just hunting for hidden gems, check out Encore today. It's available right now on iOS and Android, or you can use the website. Just use this QR code, my link in the description, or my link pinned in the comments to dive into Encore and start winning great comic deals today. So our story begins on Earth, where chaos has fully erupted thanks to the corruption of the Blight. The Juggernaut is desperately fighting against the X-Men, who have all been infected by the evil that looms over the Earth. Meanwhile, a shattered CYRA kneels before the corpse of the amazing Spider-Man. Being killed without any reeds left to bring him back has resulted in the end of Earth's greatest hero. But while CYRA is distraught, her brother CALLIX is quite overjoyed with his work. He feels that he has liberated himself and his sister from the shackles of their father, who now sits there motionless. CYRA argues that he has gone too far, that the Blight was never meant to find this realm, but CALLIX believes it was the power they were denied. He then warns her to make up her mind on what she wants to do before he returns from his conversation with his father, or else, if she doesn't join him, he will be forced to kill her as well. Coulson, who's Marvel's new death, tells CYRA it's too late for her to discover her own capacity to care about people. Well, too late for Spider-Man at least. Coulson then tries to get on with his work since CALLIX is about to make him a very busy man, but CYRA has a question. Why doesn't her father fight back against her brother, especially considering he is meant to be the all-powerful being of their realm? He's not meant to yield to anything. But there he sits, motionless and emotionless. But Coulson sees past the surface of her question and asks if something else is bothering her. Back on Earth, things are going from bad to worse, with the Blight's infection becoming more and more prominent. But thanks to Strange and an annoyed Dr. Doom, the two slowly heal some civilians. Doom, fed up with this deed, says Strange should have let him wipe the city from the Earth when the Scion was vulnerable. But this strikes a nerve within Doctor Strange. He calls out Doom for all his faults and mistakes with the Covenant. But unfortunately, all it results in is a mean blast, for no one can question one such as Doom. Back with CYRA and Coulson again, Coulson points out that until very recently her world proceeded as normal, and CYRA didn't care about any of it. She infers it's until Spider-Man endured the deaths she showed him, but Coulson says CYRA is wrong, yet very close to the truth. CYRA digs deeper in herself, the answer being Spider-Man felt and carried all the lives, he didn't just endure them. It's something she never understood before due to her detached viewpoint of nothing matters since she's immortal, but thanks to Spider-Man, to someone who'd be considered as just another insignificant player of the Covenant, he shifted her whole perspective. And so CYRA finally realizes that her father is not immovable, but rather paralyzed by loss. And you can't feel loss unless you have felt love. Coulson explains that this is what her and her father are feeling, for the love of life is the only meaning that can be found in a meaningless universe. Suddenly, as a desperate last play, CYRA wishes to strike a bargain with death. The bargain being she gives up her power and immortality as a scion of CYTTORAK to restore the one indomitable human spirit. Coulson explains how this isn't a simple trade but rather a sacrifice. But CYRA doesn't care, she must do it no matter what. And so, with her confirmation, the amazing Spider-Man is brought back to life. Peter tries to thank her, even though no words feel like they're enough for the deed she's just done. But CYRA tells him not to say anything, but rather instead, simply become. Become what he must to defend that which he loves so dearly against her family's chaos. And so, our story ends with Spider-Man reborn, charging into battle thanks to the sacrifice of CYRA, ready to save the entire world. I just need to get this out of the way. Why the f does Joe Kelly have a thing for incest? In the two stories he's had a major hand in for this volume of Amazing Spider-Man, he's made two incest remarks. One here with CALLIX'S saying he wanted to marry his sister, and the other time he made Peter say Mary Jane is like a sister to him.
Get this man to a hospital, now! What?
You know, I'm glad to see that the Spidey office is still full of complete weirdos who let their own odd fantasies infect the book. Dan Slott. But with that being said, there were actually some things I liked about this issue. For starters, the ending was genuinely really close to being really good. CYRA's speech built it up perfectly, and the way that each panel showed him slowly gaining his Spider-Man outfit added to the suspense in a way that just worked. But then to see that giant goofy Spider-Naut outfit in full force instantly took me right out of it. It just looks so wrong and cartoony. I'm not sure if I'm alone in this, but the artwork throughout the entire story arc is very jarring. We keep jumping back and forth between exaggerated cartoonish looks like here to the realistic look we had in the few issues in a row. All it results in is the story having no real sense of continuity between its chapters. It keeps going from one extreme to the other, all the while Peter's design constantly changes too. Like, remember when Spider-Man comics used to actually put effort in how he looked? Like, they had a design sheet each artist would have to follow so Peter Parker would actually look like Peter Parker. And to be honest, that jarring issue I have with the art goes beyond just that. Even with me liking majority of the dialogue here, the narration and themes of death still feel somewhat at odds with the story. Especially after we spent several issues in a row with a mopey, depressed Peter Parker. It almost feels like it's loose concepts that just don't quite fit with how things have unfolded or where the narrative currently stands, and ultimately it adds to this disconnected feeling the story gives me. Likewise with the magic elements, they just all feel undercooked. Events just happen without much structure or logic, leaning into the excuse of, it's magic, don't question it. But so far, it hasn't really clicked, it just makes everything here feel a bit flat. And when you compare it to the other main Spidey book out right now, where it feels like every word of dialogue, every choice made, every story beat is all purposely created and formed thanks to the foundation that was built with genuine love and care for the character, it simply puts this book, the main title, to complete shame. I will say though, I was honestly shocked to see that Spider-Man was talked about with nothing but respect in this issue. Do you know how rare that is in the modern day? Marvel, it seems, now consciously put effort in making Peter seem like the most annoying and useless hero ever, so to see him here actually be held up in a high regard was a pleasant surprise. I mean, it says a lot about the current state of Spider-Man comics if that's a positive for me, but I guess if you never acknowledge the small wins, you might just go insane. Before I forget, I wanted to mention how I like that one scene where Strange is lecturing Doom on how this is all his fault, and Doom just decides to blast Strange because he was foolish enough to insult his greatness. And speaking of Doom, did anyone notice how the cover was just a complete and utter lie? It's such a common theme within Marvel books lately. I mean, Spidey and Doom weren't even on the same realm, let alone share a scene together. It should have been CYRA on the cover. You know, the only character in this story that's actually written well. CYRA's been the only highlight for me in the 8 Deaths of Spider-Man. Her character is genuinely interesting, and I really enjoy the way that Spider-Man has changed her whole perspective on life, love, and sacrifice. Overall though, The Amazing Spider-Man issue 69 is, in my opinion, an okay entry for the story, but it's severely bogged down by the rest of this arc. I genuinely struggled to connect with the issue because of how bad the 8 Deaths of Spider-Man story has already been, and as a result, none of the stakes even interest me in the slightest. Even Peter Parker dying last issue, I wasn't phased. If anything, I was celebrating that shit. Like, I want him to be put out of his misery at this point. I want him to just be free from Marvel's horrible editorial team. Although it was nice that Peter was actually talked about with respect for once, and CYRA's sacrifice plus character growth was satisfying, but it's nowhere near enough to make up for the shit we've had to endure this entire story. The 8 Deaths of Spider-Man has been dragged out beyond belief, and would have worked way better as a limited series. I mean, the next issue is the finale, not just for the story, but for the volume as a whole, and the only reason I'm excited is not because I want to see how it all ends, but rather so we can finally close the chapter on the absolute worst Spider-Man volume in the character's 60+ year history. Hello? Listen, if it's that weird little clown guy again, I told you, the video is on its way.
Consider this a friendly reminder.